Oftentimes Nigeria is referred to as a viable investment hub and one of those African countries that to a large extent escaped the 2008 financial crisis. But of course, in terms of investment, there's still a number of issues hindering investment, foreign direct investment into the country. We're looking at the investment landscape of Nigeria. Joining me now is Kenneth Iwelumo. He's a former first Vice President Investment at Merrill Lynch. Thank you so much, Kenneth, for being here.
Thank you, Esther, for having me.
Now, as I said, Nigeria is often described as one of the viable investment. I don't want to use the word preferred. We'll get there. We're not quite there yet. Looking at the investment climate of Nigeria, how would you assess that right now?
I think Nigeria is a preferred destination for investment. The problem right now is that people are not aware of Nigeria. And there's so much unnecessary negativity coming out of Nigeria into the world.
No. But we still, to a large extent, have a capital in terms of, let's talk about the capital market, largely underdeveloped capital markets, especially the equities.
Yes, but you can see that it's being reformed right now. Before, liquidity is a big issue here. To my understanding, prior to the current management, stock price could go up or down 5% per day. It's supposed to be free. Also, there should be liquidity. That is, you can sell as much as you want, buy as much as you want any day. Sometimes it takes you weeks to sell shares here. But as soon as that is solved, that issue becomes irrelevant. Okay,
let's step out of Nigeria for a little bit. We do know what's going on across the globe, particularly in Europe, battling that debt crisis. The U.S. government has this huge debt, over 14 trillion US dollars. No one knows, how many years or decades it will take the U.S. to pay that up. Now, of course, at this point in time, fund managers, they probably will be, looking at their portfolios and thinking, where do we go? How do we invest? Where do we shut this business down? Do we reactivate this? Coming from Merrill Lynch, a global financial institution, what direction, or where are fund managers right now? What would you say in terms of investing, looking at some areas that are most viable right now for investors?
There are always opportunities around the world. Opportunities are always there. The issue is finding what meets your own set goals. Strong fundamentals are important. Irrespective of the bad economic climate we're in, there are companies that are doing very, very well. There will always be companies that do well. So it's for those fund managers to find those companies and invest in them. Nigeria is lucky in the sense that we're not directly affected by the global crisis. The global crisis in Europe and America is because for 20 years, people were borrowing beyond their ability to pay back. We haven't even started borrowing in Nigeria. We don't have individual debt that even comes anywhere near what the Western world have. So here, most people own outright whatever assets they own, like cars, like furniture, like houses. They pay cash. They buy it over time. In America, on the other hand, 99% of all people borrow to build homes, borrow to buy cars, borrow to buy the basic needs that they have, even borrow to feed themselves. So we're on a different level. For fund managers around, as you can see, emerging markets have been doing very well because the fund managers realize that there's a lower debt load in emerging markets, so they're moving towards emerging markets. The problem is liquidity, being able to move your investment money in and move it out freely. Once an emerging market country has liquidity, you'll see a lot of FDI coming in. But I personally do not care for portfolio investors. I'm looking for guys who come in and build factories, build structures, not those who simply come and trade in the market. It doesn't do anything for Nigeria. They're simply speculators. I'd rather have a company build a factory that employs thousands of Nigerians, list that subsidiary in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and allow other Nigerians to invest their money in it. So wealth creation, job creation.
But you said that to a large extent we have been unharmed by especially the Eurozone debt crisis. But of course, there's the issue of oil production, oil prices falling. We rely heavily on that. We have an oil benchmark in our 2012 budget of $72 per barrel. Whatever goes beyond that, goes into our excess crude account. We rely heavily on oil prices. So whenever there's volatility at the market, we're largely affected. There's the issue of demand, the level of demand from Europe. If many of the governments embarking on austerity measures, broad spending cuts. There's China also cutting down its growth forecast also because they may not require so much in terms of demand for oil. So of course that may also affect us.
That's true, but you have to also realize that we have the best quality oil out there. Number one. Number two, the population growth in the planet is still growing. Every day you have 1 million or more new middle class people who are demanding items that require a lot of oil, energy, power. So, yes, you're going to find ups and downs in the price of oil, but right now it's going to still stay up, irrespective of the European issue.
So, in terms of our let's come down to our financial markets again. What's your perspective in terms of growth, the growth level so far of Nigeria's financial markets?
I'm very, very optimistic that in the next few years the Nigerian markets will pick up and people will see the growth we had in the past. It's unfortunate that the previous central governors made rules that literally beat up the market. Even if you're trying to stop bank loans being used to buy and speculate in the stock market, you can stop it, but still give time for people to exit in an orderly manner, especially when the market is illiquid. But when you give 30 days and there's a stampede, what you have is a crash. It takes time to mend the broken bone, and we're at that point right now. The Nigerian market, there are a lot of great companies with strong fundamentals. A lot of us are impatient here. Investing in the stock market is not an emotional thing. It's something that you do as with a business mentality. You invest and you leave it to grow. A farmer grows his corn, grows his yams. He does not go there every day to check the size of the tuber. He waits until maturity. The other thing is that you should look for companies that have liquidity. You can get in and out. Companies that have strong fundamentals. That is, they're in sectors that will go irrespective, like the food sector, the petroleum sector. Once you find a good company, you leave it alone, you buy on dips, and over a 5 to 10 year period, you'll be rewarded for your patience.
Well, perhaps that might be true for the sophisticated investors, the portfolio managers, and the foreign investors who are in the market. But for that average, local investor who, in terms of investor education, isn't.
This is where the various brokerages and banks should come in and educate their customers. If you don't educate your customers, they won't make good customers. You have to teach them. You have to have workshops. You have to let them know that this is how you make money. Some people think it's a gamble in the casino. It's not a casino. It's something that you put away for the rainy day. And if you buy a balanced and mixed portfolio and you hold it for the long term, you'll be okay. The 4 years that we've been down in Nigeria, 10 years from now, 20 years from now will be a blimp. Most people won't even remember the pain that is going on right now.
Now, as fund, let me take you by a little farther away, outside. Because I know that fund managers across although you have said you don't care much for fund portfolio managers or fund managers
in the Nigeria of today.
In the Nigeria of today, but many of them are on the outside. They're looking at the globe as a whole. They're looking at those regions where they can go and put their money.
They can come in, but they are not adding the value that we need right now. We need jobs in Nigeria. We need wealth creation in Nigeria.
But individual economies, especially the U.S. and countries in Europe, are looking to bring jobs back home to themselves also. So if everybody's looking to bring the jobs back, away from China back, to their respective countries, how are we going to get?
We have an advantage. We have low cost labor here,
and we have the doing business indicators of because we saw one a few weeks ago that wasn't too favorable in terms of doing indicators doing business in Nigeria.
My problem with all these pronouncements is that I haven't seen them do thorough research on Nigeria. I'm tired of for example, the Federal Office of Statistics using outdated UN estimates and then extrapolating on it. Personally, I think with 70% of the Nigerian economy undocumented, that Nigerian economy is actually far, far bigger than South Africa's. But right now we're being put down because we don't have this paucity of information.
We have the National Bureau of Statistics. We have a new statistician general, and
but
I want to believe that
I've seen
they take in these indicators from within the Nigerian investment space or land space, as it were, to postulate these numbers.
Well, I've traveled far and wide in Nigeria, and I've seen thousands of expensive homes outside Lagos, outside Abuja. Nobody's ever valued them. Nobody's valued my country home. How did you know the real GDP of Nigeria? How did you know the real net worth of Nigeria? Most people don't go out. They don't know. So how do you know the value of Nigeria? And then we have a very low tax base. Taxes is what you use to value property and value assets. We don't. So nobody knows. There's so many, there are billions and billions and billions of dollars in assets in Nigeria that nobody has accounted for. Once you bring those into online, you'd be amazed. It's just like China. 10 years ago, China was number 50 or number 60. All of a sudden, it's now number two.
Second biggest
okay,
economy.
You're going to see a revaluation of the Nigerian economy in the next 5 years. I wish the central bank would help the Department of Statistics in doing surveys, going out there and seeing what Nigeria is really worth. Not what the government thinks we are or we have.
Interesting. Hold your thoughts first. We need to take a quick break at this point. We'll come back to talk more about that. We're looking at investment climate in Nigeria, of course, from a global perspective. I have with me Kenneth Uwelumo. He's a former first vice president investment at Merrill Lynch, a leading global financial institution. And that's what we're looking at today. We'll be right back after this break. Welcome back to Business Morning. We're looking at the investment climate in Nigeria. Let's look at some investment windows. We have all kinds of sectors. We have the real estate, of course, as a capital market, but we're not sure how much of these areas have been fully harnessed by investors, particularly foreign investors, or even local investors here. It just seems to be all scattered. We don't, like you said, we don't have figures, we don't have statistics to show who is investing where and what has been developed. With all of this, what is the future of investment in terms of harnessing investment here in Nigeria?
Excellent. You have 160 million people. You have the middle class growing rapidly. You have a lot of people going into business on their own simply because they can't find work. Small businesses are the largest employers in any economy. the person who has a provision store that employs 4 people is doing more, has more impact on Nigeria than a large company like Dunlop or PZ or UAC. So when you have a large population, you tend to have a large economy. And when you have natural assets like Nigeria has, it's only a question of time.
How much of that have we been able to harness? Because we're still dealing with a structurally imbalanced economy. We're heavily reliant on exports. SMEs don't have easy access to credit, although they account for in terms of job and employment in the economy. But all of that are still challenges. But you seem to be extremely optimistic.
Credit is a problem everywhere in the world. I think it's even easier to borrow money here than in the U.S. We have the credit rating system in the U.S. that isn't here yet. You can't lend to somebody you don't know. I don't know why the banks haven't sat to come together to create a database of people so that you know who borrows, who pays, and who doesn't. We're still evolving. We're still moving to the point where people understand that you don't pay when you feel like. You pay as and when due, which is what happens in Europe and America and other rapidly developing countries. So who do you lend? The Central Bank governor, I heard you say, was asking banks to lend. Who do you lend to? The banks are in it to make money. They're not in it as a social organization.
Okay, well, if they decide that so many companies, like you said, we don't have a database of who's who and who makes what, if they feel that some companies have, very high risk in terms of debt servicing, of course they will probably look elsewhere. We have the treasury bills market that gives very attractive, juicy interest rates. We have the bond market, federal bond market, where interest rates are just the highest on the African continent, as high as 16%. So why would the banks go and lend to the private sector when they can go to the treasury bills or bond market and have higher returns?
Instead of appealing to the banks, I think the Central Bank should lead the initiative and create 1 or 2 credit bureaus where Nigerians who are interested in borrowing money can put in their data information. One of the things that is handicapping Nigeria is people don't have a national identity number that's unique to you, like in the US or Europe. So it's easy for someone to borrow money and then disappear. How are you going to locate him? How are you going to find him? In the US, you borrow money anywhere you are in the US, you're going to be located thanks to the tax system, thanks to that number.
Okay, so that's quite interesting.
But Nigeria, again, is only 18 years old in my mind. We're 18. A baby, yes. We had 35 lost years. They don't count. We're just starting.
Now let's talk about challenges to investment. Of course, there's the issue of security. We had the National Bureau of Statistics yesterday after putting out an inflation rate for the month of April, 12.9%. That's insecurity. We have the terrorist attacks that might hamper foreign direct investment into the country. Of course, that slowed down some of the economic activities in the country.
But it's for the Ministry of Information, is for the various government departments to become more aggressive in publicizing Nigeria. No matter what negativity you find in Saudi Arabia, it never gets out to the press. Instead of us to try and attract people in, we keep airing our dirty laundries outside. We're not the only country that has Boko Haram. We're not the only country with bombings. We're not the only country with crime rates. God created all of us. If 10% of Americans are criminals, 10% of Nigerians are criminals. Why do you expect the Nigerians to sit down and become holy? It's up to the various agencies like the police to be trained and to control such things. You don't go, Johannesburg is the most dangerous country in the world, yet you don't see South Africans touting that. Instead, they talk about you coming to visit them, coming to invest. We don't do that. I haven't seen any adverts from Nigeria begging people to come here. I haven't.
So if the news comes out, there's a bombing somewhere, there's a gun attack somewhere, well, we keep quiet. We report it.
No, you report it, but you don't sensationalize it. You put it in the proper context. You have an eye that, listen, we're a black nation, a black superpower. It's scary to most white countries. Just like China was scary 20 years ago. They'll get over it, but we also have to do everything possible to make Nigeria attractive to them. And one of the things is publicity.
Now, as an investment firm, I know you're no longer with Merrill Lynch. What advice would you give to investment foreign local investors here who are looking to several areas of the economy to invest in terms of, ignoring all the security challenge, the news from, in terms of security challenges, what they should just to go ahead and...
The issue is not the local investors. Local investors in Nigeria are investing. The issue is bringing in the serious billions of dollars extra from abroad. The challenge here is for us to let them know that Nigeria is here in business, that the Boko Haram crisis is serious but will be resolved. Britain had the IRA bombings. People still invested in Britain. Germany had the Red Army issue. People still where they invest. America's had mafia and all sorts of things. People are still investing there. Half of Colombia is under rebel territory control. Yet people still invest in Colombia. India has 3 civil wars going on simultaneously right now: Kashmir, Kerala, Assam. Yet people are rushing into India because they downplay the negatives and focus on the positives. We do not talk about our positives. Instead, we talk about the negatives. We have 160 million people. We have a large economy, a huge economy. We have a cheap labor base. The labor here is low cost. It is cheaper to build things in Nigeria than, say, Thailand or Philippines. The only problem we have right now is power. But large industry bring their own infrastructure with them. You can tire Nigeria from here completely and nobody will still come and invest here. The key thing is bringing the right industry that will now form a nucleus for others to come into that area.
And definitely, in terms of policies, the Ministry of Investment has been going out for some road shows to attract foreign direct investment. We hear that all the time.
I'm not impressed with those.
We hear that all the time in the country, of course. So let's be fair to them. It hasn't been all negative. They have been going out.
I've been to a few of them. I'm not impressed.
Why aren't you impressed?
They're not well organized. Most of these road shows, you see Nigerians there. You don't see the people we're looking for. We haven't learned yet to go and get lobbyists, powerful lobbyists in America and Europe, to go bring the right caliber of investors to us. Instead, you see local Nigerians sitting around listening to the same story. I've been to many. Nothing going on. So when I hear there's a roadshow, I laugh.
And that's interesting and a little disturbing.
I'm free right now, so I'm not. I don't. So I can speak.
A little disturbing because sometimes we go as far as Australia. I know.
To do what?
Foreign direct investment, wherever we can find investors.
Let them show you the video of the participants. Nobody. You pay top dollar for the best lobbyists. They'll bring, or the best investment advisors. They'll bring you top-notch investors to listen to you. Unless those people come in, nobody's coming here. Those who are coming here, like Guinness and others, are here because they have no choice. This is a huge market. But others, like Toyota or GM, don't have to be here. Yet those are the ones that we need here. We need someone to come here and build a 1 million naira low-cost car and make Nigeria an industrial base to supply other West African or African countries. But we haven't done that yet. The sovereign fund is a tool that, if well managed, could do that. But it's hung up in politics. And Nigeria is suffering while we're doing all that. The sovereign fund is a critical tool for forcing, not begging, not asking, forcing foreign direct investment here. If this was 2 years ago and we had the Sovereign Wealth Fund and GM was on the ropes, a $250 million equity investment in GM or debt investment, on the condition that they come here and set up a $1 billion factory, they'll do it. That factory becomes a nucleus for other companies coming in. And before you know it, you have an industrial complex with thousands of indirect jobs, suppliers, and the roll of effects. And then if you also ask them to list that subsidiary in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, you create wealth.
So you're saying we don't have the right policies to support all of this? Not yet. Because at the end of the day, it all falls back to policymakers who have to make those policies that will create that enabling environment, that will make those policies, that'll be very attractive, in terms
awareness
of
level.
Investment.
We're getting there. We're evolving, but the awareness level is still low. We're getting there. Nigeria is evolving. Nigeria is actually moving in the right path.
Despite all the challenges, the security issues, the power, infrastructure, all of that.
It is in chaos that you have positive movement. If everything was okay, we'll be stagnant.
So it's just a normal evolving process.
Yes.
Towards
just like the challenges of a child crawling, learning to walk after crawling. It's an uphill.
How do you feel about our Vision 2020? You know, we're trying to be one of the most developed economies come 2020. You know, our Vision 2020. How do you feel about that?
That's great, but again, if you don't bring in FDI, if you don't bring in technology transfer, if you don't bring in investment, you're not going to achieve that.
So that's a sticking point, because many analysts are looking at the pace of growth, at the pace of all the promises, all the policies that have been put in place to ensure that this, you know, everything, infrastructure, power, all of that is addressed to ensure that we get there by 2020.
Like I said, certain industries, critical cornerstone industries, bring their own infrastructure. When GM comes here to set up a plant, it doesn't need NEPA. It's going to create its own and probably sell the excess to NEPA. So that's not the issue. The issue is deciding what Nigeria wants. Do we make Benin center for outsourcing and customer service? Do we make Enugu center for manufacturing? Do we make Kano center for electronics assembly? Do we make Damaturu center for aircraft repairs? The government has to decide and then attract those companies using the sovereign fund and others to invest in. China does that. They go out, invest in the company that they want in China, take it over, and then bring it over to China. Volvo is owned by the Chinese. Volvo technology is now going into Chinese cars. In 2-3 years now, you'll see cars that are on the level of Volvo, and you wonder how managed. They invested. They went out and invested. What is Toyota doing in flood-bound Thailand when there's Nigeria with no earthquake, no flood, no nothing? Toyota doesn't need NEPA, doesn't need power. It will bring its own. $1 billion investment, 100 million to generate 100 megawatts is nothing. The key thing is letting them know that there is Nigeria, there's 160 million people here. We haven't done a good job of that.
We have many of these issues, many of these, let me not use the word roadshows, since you said you're not impressed by that. We have many of these forums, and many foreign investors from all over, they come to the country. When we have new ambassadors from other countries that come in for the first time, as ambassadors, they meet with the president, they meet with ministers. So of course, we're having them from all corners of the earth, of the world rather, coming to Nigeria. So of course, that first contact, that should put them in the front line to say, okay, this is Nigeria.
Who's the typical Nigerian ambassador, for example? What do they know about investments? Most of them. So who's the typical foreign ambassador? What do they know about investments? We have to go out there and beg or force. I remember in 1963, a moribund little island called Singapore. The president used to go out with a bullhorn to all ocean liners coming in, begging them to come and check out his country. Where's Singapore today? We haven't done it. There's so much oil money, so there's no need for tourism, for example. Nigeria is blessed with so many natural features, from Yankari to the ranch in Abudu, to other places, to Kainji. But we are not making use of them. Tourism attracts people here, and from here, people now stay and bring in businesses. But if you don't have tourism, then... And please, there's another thing I despise about a lot of Nigerians, comparing us to Ghana. We're not in the same league. We insult ourselves whenever we mention Ghana. Ghana's economy is still on the same size as the city of Abuja. So why are we comparing ourselves to Ghana? Why are we comparing ourselves to Benin Republic? If the Benin Republic's port was open to Nigerians, it would be stocked the same way. We're on a different level. We're a huge country. People don't understand that. If we're going to insult ourselves, don't compare us with others that are nowhere near us.
I mean, you can't help taking a peek behind your, the wall over to the other side to see how your neighbor is doing. If your neighbor is prosperous, I mean, you have to wonder why.
The word prosperous is relative. 28 million, 160 million. Where's the prosperity? Where's the comparison? If Nigeria only had 20 million people, we would be billionaires here. But we have a large population. That large population is what is going to help us down the road. In the current world, the countries like Belgium, countries like Holland are gone. That's why they need to be part of the EU. And by the way, all EU is wasting, or the EU countries are wasting their time. Greece and others who have problems eventually will have to leave. Okay. They have no choice. The US went into debt to climb out. They can't do that within the EU framework, so they have to come out.
Okay, well, we're almost completely out of time, but obviously from all that you've said, you're very, very optimistic.
Very optimistic on Nigeria.
On Nigeria, the investment climate, even though, we're still, of course, there's still room for improvement, there's still room for growth.
Remember, this country is a complicated country. We have 250 different ethnic groups. Everybody has to be part of the Nigerian experiment.
You think that's perhaps been the biggest challenge for the government?
Yes, naturally, everything should be on meritocracy, but you can't if you want this country to be together. So there is going to be drags. And so the executive, the president and others have to account for these differences when they're doing things. Everybody's had their problem. I mean, all the powerful nations have one large homogeneous group. The British have the English. The Americans have the white males. We don't. And yet we're still here.
Well, we are more complicated, no doubt, like you said. I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so
very
much. Very insightful contribution there. We hope to have you back soon when you're back in the country. I have been talking to Kenneth Iwelumo. He's a former Vice President, Investment at Merrill Lynch, top leading global financial institution. And we have been looking at investment climate in Nigeria. We'll be looking at that in terms of the future of investment, where portfolio managers can look at, and of course, how Nigeria, in terms of economic growth, can go further now, and of course all achieving that vision 2020. That's about all we can take on today's edition of Business Morning. Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm Esther Ubudaga. Channels News Track is at 11. Bye for now.